Kavit,
Hello.
hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome you all for our 9th lecture series in general surgery. I'm really thankful to all the panelists as well as the chairpersons for coming and uh, uh, helping us out to carry out this program at a very short notice. I'll ask Niranjan to say a few words and then I'll introduce the chairpersons. Niranjan Agarwal, over to you.
Thank you, Rajesh, and welcome back, friends, for the 9th series in MSS lecture series. Today we are going to discuss about lymphedema in total. I suppose and I presume that we, as general surgeons, still continue to treat lymphedema. I say this because when we were trying to find speakers for the topic today, most of the speakers said, "नहीं हमको कोई GI topic दे दो या hernia दे दो." You know, they were not ready to talk on this topic. But when I go back and look at our practice, even in a tertiary care center like Bombay Hospital, most of the lymphedema patients are first referred to a general surgeon. So why surgeons were refusing to talk, I am really kind of perplexed on this. But I must thank all the current speakers who have readily agreed to talk on this topic, and they have prepared themselves so that the people who are logged in today could benefit out of their knowledge and deliberations. So thank you again, once again, and thank you, Juventus, for supporting us all around. Requesting again all the delegates who are logged in, if there is any way you want us to improve upon this series, you can let us know on our personal mobile numbers. You can send us a mail on the Mumbai Surgical Society email address. We will try and implement whatever good suggestions we receive from you. Next sessions will be now the clinical subjects will start, mainly the neck nodes, etc., from the next sitting onwards, followed by esophagus, stomach, and GI tract, something which general surgeons look forward to. So bear with us for the other topics, but then these are part of our practice and cannot be neglected anyway. And that was the motto, to revise the entire general surgery, which we must have learned way back in our residency days. So thank you again, and over back to you, Rajesh, to introduce the chairpersons.
Thank you, Niranjan. So we have Dr. Manman Jadliwala. Dr. Jadliwala sir is senior consultant in GI surgery at Bombay Hospital. He has a vast experience in thoracic as well as neck and GI surgery. Dr. Jadliwala has many presentations to his credit at national and international level. He is a thorough gentleman, and I know sir for last 15 to 20 years. He has a phenomenal hand and an excellent surgeon. Our next chairperson is Dr. Kavita Jadhav. Dr. Kavita Jadhav is an associate professor at Grand Medical College JJ Group of Hospital. Dr. Kavita's keen interest is in laparoscopic GI surgery. Dr. Kavita has presented many national as well as international paper, and she is a member of various associations and societies. Over to Dr. Mannan Jadliwala sir.
Yes.
Sorry.
At the outset,
And Kavita
Yes.
to take the proceedings. Thank you.
yes, at the outset, we are very thankful to Mumbai Surgical Society, Dr. Niranjan and Dr. Rajesh, for letting us chair this session on difficult subjects, easy to diagnose but difficult to treat. So I request Dr. Ashwini Bhag to give the first session, that is osteopathy and clinical manifestation of lymphedema. And I also request my co-chairperson Kavita Jadhav also to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Jadliwala. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Niranjan Agarwal, Dr. Rajesh Yadav, and MSS for giving me the opportunity to talk on this subject. And I'd like to take your permission to share the screen, please. First slide.
Ma'am, you can just stop the share screen and just go to the first slide.
Yeah, do that.
Stop the screen sharing. Yeah, now share screen.
I'll have to share screen again. I'll have
Yeah.
to go back to this.
Zoom.
Zoom. Sorry for that. Okay, I'm going to be talking about lymphedema in limbs.
Ma'am, please make it full.
Yeah, I have made it full. It's full on my screen.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes,
full.
yes.
Anymore? Is it
Yeah,
not?
it is full. It is full. Go
Yes,
ahead.
yes, yes.
All right. So I'm going to talk about lymphedema in limbs, etiopathogenesis, and clinical presentation. Now, first, let's go to the basics a little bit. What are the functions of the lymphatic system? So the principal function of the lymphatic system is the return of the protein-rich fluid to the circulation through the lymphatic venous junctions in the jugular area. Now, this fluid which is returned to the circulation includes water, electrolytes, low molecular weight moieties like polypeptides, cytokines, and growth factors, and macromolecules like fibrinogen, albumin, globulins, coagulation, and fibrinolytic factors. Intestinal lymph, which is also called chyle, transports cholesterol, long chain fatty acids, triglycerides, and fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K to the circulation. Lymphocytes and other immune cells also circulate within the lymphatic system. Now, what is the structure of the lymphatics? We find that the lymphatic capillaries are found beneath the epidermis. They are not present in the epidermis of the skin, and they are present beneath the epidermis in the superficial dermis. These vessels drain into valved channels in the deep dermis and the subdermal tissues and form larger channels which are superficial to the deep fascia. So they are found in the intermuscular fascia, but they are absent in the muscles, tendons, cartilage, and the brain and the cornea. Now, looking at the anatomy of the lymphatic system, the lymph capillaries consist of a single layer of epithelial cells. These start blindly from glove-like, finger-like endings, and they are arranged in a network of tubules around the arterioles and the venules. The unique permeability of the lymphatic capillaries is facilitated by the presence of vestigial or absent basement membrane beneath the lymphatic endothelial cells. The intercellular junction of the capillary wall has minute clefts, and these clefts are overlapping of the cell ends, and they act as flap valves which can be held apart by collagen microfibrils, which allows the movement of particles inside the inside the lymphatic capillaries. The distribution of the fluid and the protein between the vascular system and the interstitial fluid depends on the balance of the hydrostatic and the oncotic pressures between the two compartments, which are called Starling's forces, and the relative impermeability of the blood capillary membrane to larger molecules. In health, there is net capillary filtration, and this filtration is the one which is removed by the lymphatic system. The mechanism of lymph flow towards the heart, the resting interstitial fluid pressure is -2 to -6 millimeters mercury, but the lymphatic pressures are positive. So that lymph has to flow against a small pressure gradient. So lymph flow towards the heart is dependent on the following mechanisms. Prevention of reflux by the valves, which helps to maintain prograde flow. In lymphedema, the intrinsic lymphatic vessel contractility is hampered because it is constantly distended by the lymph. Hence, exercise, limb movement, and external compression are important surrogates for the natural mechanism. Sequential contraction and relaxation of the muscular elements of the lymphatics assists onward flow. There is transient increase in the interstitial fluid pressure due to muscular contraction and external compression. And last but not the least, respiratory activity and negative intrathoracic pressure also helps in the mechanism of the lymph flowing towards the heart. Now, this is the lymphatic system. You find that the lymph from the lower limbs, the left side of the abdomen and the thorax, the left side of the head, and the left upper limb drains via the thoracic duct into the junction of the internal jugular vein and the left subclavian vein, while lymph from the right upper limb, the right side of the thorax, and the right head is returned to the circulatory system by the right lymphatic duct, which joins the right subclavian duct at its junction with the right internal jugular vein. Now, lymphedema, what is lymphedema? So lymphedema is defined as abnormal limb swelling, which is caused by the accumulation of increased amounts of protein-rich interstitial fluid secondary to defective lymphatic drainage in the presence of near normal net capillary filtration. Now, pathophysiology of lymphedema. Lymphedema results from the lymphatic system being affected by either aplasia, hypoplasia, or dysmotility, which is reduced contractility with or without valvular insufficiency, or there may be obliteration by infection, inflammation, external compression, or malignancy. And there is surgical extirpation of the lymphatic nodes. But all these obstructive factors lead to lymphatic hypertension and distension, with further impairment of contractility and valvular incompetence. Lymphostasis leads to accumulation in the interstitial fluid of proteins, growth factors, glycosaminoglycans, and bacteria. There is increased collagen production by fibroblasts, accumulation of inflammatory cells like macrophages and lymphocytes, and activation of keratinocytes. Protein-rich edema fluid has increased deposition of ground substance, subdermal fibrosis, and dermal thickening and proliferation. Lymphedema is confined to epiphyseal spaces. Muscle compartments are hypertrophied due to the increased work which is involved in the limb movement, but characteristically, muscles are free of edema itself. Going to the etiological classification of lymphedema. So lymphedema can either be primary or secondary. All cases of primary lymphedema are supposed to be due to an inherent abnormality of the lymphatic system, which is caused by congenital lymphatic dysplasia. And lymphedema is commoner in the lower limbs due to gravity, bipedal gait, and lymphatic system of the leg being less well developed than the upper extremity. So in the primary lymphedema, the cause is unknown, and primary lymphedema itself is divided into three, that is congenital, where the onset is less than 2 years of age. Precox, which there the onset is between 2 to 35 years of age, and tarda, where the onset is after 35 years of age. The congenital and precox are further divided into two, where it may be sporadic, and the second is where it is familial. The familial one in the congenital is called the Nonnet-Milroy's disease, and the one in precox is called the Letessier-Maget's disease. Secondary lymphedema is DAS, in which this is acquired lymphedema, which the lymphatic system itself is normal, but there is a definite underlying cause. Now, etiological classification of lymphedema. So you may have where the lymphatic system to begin with is normal, but it gets affected by various causes, and these later on cause the lymphedema. So you may have parasitic infection, which is filariasis most commonly, or even tuberculosis. There may be surgical excision of lymph nodes, like in inguinal node dissection or axillary lymph node dissection. There may be a primary lymphatic malignancy, which has affected the lymph nodes. There may be metastatic spread to the lymph nodes, causing destruction of the lymph nodes, radiotherapy to lymph nodes causing destruction, trauma, especially degloving injuries, recurrent superficial thrombophlebitis and deep venous thrombosis, fungal infection like Tinea pedis, or exposure to foreign body materials like silica particles, which then enter the lymphatic channels and block the lymphatic channels. So the risk factors which are associated with lymphedema, the congenital ones, the primary lymphedema, there is a congenital familial disposition. There is a defective lymphatic development, and the lymphedema is precipitated either spontaneously or by trauma, pregnancy, infection, or surgery. And secondary lymphedema, where the lymphatics are normal to begin with, but due to certain insults caused by the various risk factors, lymphedema develops. So what are the risk factors for upper limb or the trunk lymphedema? So there may be surgery with axillary lymph node dissection, scar formation, fibrosis, radiodermatitis following axillary radiotherapy. There may be wound complications causing infection, seroma formation of breast cancer surgery, advanced cancer in axilla, trauma in at-risk arms, where venipuncture, BP measurement, or injection has been taken, where in that particular limb where axillary lymph node dissection has been taken on that, or has been done on that side, chronic skin disorders and inflammation, insertion of pacemaker, AV shunts for dialysis, long air travel, or presence of the person in an area of endemic lymphatic filariasis, sorry. Risk factors for lower limb edema. There may be surgery like inguinal node dissection. There may be post-operative pelvic radiotherapy, advanced cancer, intrapelvic or intra-abdominal tumors, which may involve or directly compress lymphatic vessels, thrombophlebitis and chronic venous insufficiency, especially the post-thrombotic syndrome, obesity, illnesses like hypothyroidism, kidney or cardiac disease and hypoproteinemia, chronic skin disorders and inflammation, immobilization or prolonged air travel, presence in an area endemic for lymphatic filariasis. Clinical classification of lymphedema. The subclinical lymphedema is the first grade, where there is excess interstitial fluid, and there are histological abnormalities in the lymphatics, but there is no obvious lymphedema. In grade 1, the lymphedema is pitting, but it disappears on elevation and bed rest. In grade 2, the edema does not pit and does not reduce on elevation, and there is a positive Stemmer's sign, which means that the skin of the toes cannot be pinched up. And grade 3 is that in which edema is associated with irreversible skin changes like fibrosis, papillae, or hyperpigmentation. Symptoms and signs of lymphedema, it characteristically involves the foot. There is loss of the ankle contour. There is a buffular hump which forms on the dorsum of the foot. The toes appear square. Skin of the dorsum of the toes cannot be pinched up, which is called the Stemmer's sign. In the early stages, edemas can pit, and it decreases on rest and elevation. But later on, there is dermal thickening, there is fibrosis and hyperkeratosis. And in advanced conditions, there may be dermatophytosis and onychomycosis, that is fungal infection of the skin and the nails, fissuring, verrucae, and papillae. Ulceration is seen only if there is associated chronic venous insufficiency. Lymphangiomas are dilated dermal lymphatics, and they may lymphangiosarcomas may develop in long-standing lymphademas. These are confirmed by biopsy, and amputation may be curative. And the malignancies which are associated with lymphademas are lymphangiosarcomas, squamous cell carcinoma, Kaposi's sarcoma, etc. Primary lymphedema is due to congenital lymphatic dysplasia, and it is commoner in the lower limbs. And we have already seen that this could be familial or hereditary, and or it could be syndromic. And the syndromic ones are those which are associated with Turner syndrome, Klinefelter's, Downs, and Klippel-Trenaunay-Weber's syndrome. Secondary lymphedema, the commonest form of lymphedema, and it has many recognized causes like infection, trauma, malignant disease, venous disease, inflammation, endocrine disease, and immobility. Secondary, the commonest cause that we all know is filariasis. This filariasis is the commonest cause, and it is worldwide, it is the commonest cause. It is caused by the adult form of the viviparous nematode Wuchereria bancrofti in 90% of cases. Its only host is man. It is spread by the bite of the Culex fatigans or Anopheles mosquito. By the mosquito bite, immature parasites called microfilaria are inoculated into the bloodstream. They enter the lymphatics, and the adult worms lodge in the lymph vessels and the lymph nodes. They cause obstruction, reactionary inflammatory damage, fibrosis, and thickening of the vessel walls. Proximal lymphatics are grossly dilated with the adult worms, and the degree of edema is often massive, and hence the term elephantiasis. Secondary lymphema is also because of malignancy and the treatment of malignancy. So the presence of malignancies proximal to the limb may cause obstruction of the lymphatics by external compression or by obliteration of the lymphatics by infiltration. Primary lymph node malignancies like lymphomas or metastasis in lymph nodes may cause destruction of the lymphatics. Surgical extirpation of the lymph nodes, as in inguinal or axillary node dissection, can cause lymphedema of the ipsilateral limb. Addressing the axilla and efforts to reduce overtreatment are assuming great importance in the treatment of CA breast. Axillary lymph node dissection is done in selective patients only, and node negative patients undergo sentinel node biopsy to reduce chances of lymphedema. In certain high volume centers, lymphovascular anastomoses also are being done to avoid lymphedema. Secondary lymphedemas also may be caused by trauma. So there is chronic localized or generalized swelling following trauma, and degloving injuries, burns, and occasionally tenosynovitis may cause troublesome persistent swelling. Chronic venous insufficiency and lymphedema may coexist.
Yeah.
And lymphedema may be seen in the post-thrombotic limb. And endemic elephantiasis or podoconiosis is common in the tropics in Africa because of people moving about barefoot in soil which is composed of alkaline volcanic rocks, which contain silica, leading to destruction of peripheral lymphatics by silica particles, leading to lymphedema. So about lymphedema, the only thing that we can say is it doesn't get better. Doctors try to make it better, or you could just get better at handling it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwini, Dr. Ashwini. It was very informative and very nice talk. Question answers. I mean, there are presently no question answer, but we will take it later. So next
Thank
speaker.
you so much, Dr. Kavita.
Thank you, ma'am. The next speaker is Dr. Mitusha Verma. She is consultant radiologist in Nanavati Hospital, and she is going to talk on the radiological evaluation of lymphedema. Dr. Mitusha Verma.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Ma'am, I think I'm audible and the screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
But if you can speak a bit loud, you are audible, but probably a bit louder.
Okay, sir. Is it better now?
No.
Okay.
Maybe you can remove the headphone and speak directly into the,
Yeah. Is it better?
much better.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. So after this wonderful and systematic explanation, which ma'am, Dr. Wag took about the pathophysiology of lymphedema and the normal physiology, now I'll be taking in a short while of 15 minutes about the role of imaging in lymphedema, so that we understand what is the diagnostic modality of choice and how we can go into the depths of diagnosing the cause of lymphedema. Before I go ahead, I would like to thank and acknowledge my all radiology knowledge to my mentor, Dr. Deepak Patkar sir. And I would also like to thank all the organizers of this wonderful series of lectures, Dr. Niranjan Agrawal sir and Dr. Anshuman Manasvi sir, for having me here today. So what I'm going to deal about is just a little bit of introduction of the topic, imaging techniques which we have, MRI protocol, because that will be the most important imaging modality as far as radiology is concerned, the current guidelines and future directions. So I won't take these slides in detail. This has already been covered by ma'am in depth, the definition of lymphedema and the primary and secondary types of lymphedema. So ma'am already explained to us like what are the primary lymphedema varieties and then what are the secondary lymphedemas. So cause being neoplastic or metastatic diseases being most common nowadays, and also surgical interventions. So coming to the imaging techniques, we have various imaging modalities available which have been used on and off, including ultrasonography, CT scans with contrast, MR and MR lymphangiographies, lymphoscintigraphy, and then also lymphangiography based upon specific dyes. So what I'm going to deal about is the first three and their importance, and just to understand which of the three is the imaging modality of choice. Imaging is not necessary to make the diagnosis. The clinical acumen is enough most of the time to get into the diagnosis of lymphedema. But what is the role of imaging? It can be used to confirm lymphedema, that there is no other cause of limb swelling per se, to document that yes, it is lymphedema, to assess the extent of involvement, and to determine the therapeutic interventions. Also, it can be used as a follow-up modality after the treatment has started. So now coming into this particular technique, that is MRI lymphangiography. This is a very potential imaging modality, but an underutilized one. So what is the MRI protocol we use? I will not take into the details of sequences, etc., which is important from radiology point of view, but not as point of view of a surgeon. But we take the scan into three steps. One is morphologic pre-contrast imaging. The second will be post-intradermal contrast injection imaging sequences. And the third will be post-contrast MR venography. So it is an elaborative kind of MR sequences and MRI scans. For morphologic pre-contrast sequences, what we are going to take is the axial stars, axial T1. So basically few morphologic sequences so that we are sure that yes, it is lymphedema and nothing else. We are there to rule out the possibility of any focal collections because the limb is swollen. So just to rule out any focal collection, any kind of osseous abnormality, muscular abnormality. So we get a complete idea with these sequences. Afterwards, there is going to be a procedure where we are going to inject intradermal contrast mixed with lidocaine in a particular amount. And that particular contrast after injection into the web spaces, we are going to again repeat the MRI sequences. After intervals, ideally after 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 hours, if required 6 hours based upon the discretion of the radiologist. And again, a sequence will be repeated after 24 hours. So the patient is ideally should be called back again after 24 hours. These sequences are just going to take around 5 to 10 minutes of scan time, the ones which we are repeating again and again. And also we would like to add, if possible, post-IV contrast MRI venography. We will see why we want post-IV contrast scan as well. So here is how we can image or what kind of image we acquire after getting those coronal and axial T1 and STIR images. So these are the STIR. That is, STIR is nothing else, but it's a fat suppressed sequence. So when we suppress the normal fat intensity, the edema per se is very much evident on these images. So here we can easily see that this kind of cracked earth appearance of edema which is hyper intense on STIR. And this is like diffuse involvement of the limbs. And here we are sure that the muscles are normal, bone is normal, there is no focal collection present, and it is just diffuse circumferential lymphedema. So these are the other set of images which we get with MRI, T1 and coronal post contrast. So it gives a very good idea beyond what, like the structural detail is also available and functional detail is also available. So that is an added advantage of MR based studies. So this is how we inject into the web spaces. So if it is a lower limb study, then we are going to use the web spaces in the foot. And if it is an upper limb lymphedema study, we are going to use the web spaces in the hand. So here in the spaces, intradermal injection is performed. Very small quantity of fluid, which is mixture of the gadolinium based contrast and lidocaine, is injected. With all aseptic precautions, the patient is informed, and then after every interval, which we have already discussed, the MRI sequences are performed. But we have to get a specific set of images before injecting the contrast that will be performed as a baseline study. So this is the kind of image what we kind of get after the injection of contrast in the web spaces. We have not given any contrast in intravenous format till now. So whatever we are seeing which has been injected in the subdermal or intradermal space, this is all getting carried away by the lymphatic channels. So this is what we are going to acquire as MRI images. This will take hardly around 5 minutes of a single sequence. And when we kind of process it with our special software, we can reformat in this format of lymphangiography. So MRI gives, if one thing we can remember out of this particular session is that MRI gives both the details, structural details, as well as also gives idea about the functional details in MR lymphangiography. Another thing which is important in these studies, which we came across through our experience, was the number of lymph nodes. So it has been always specifically asked for that you have to give an idea to the referring surgeon about the number of lymph nodes, the morphology of lymph nodes present, because in cases of primary lymphedema, when we are looking for aplasia, hypoplasia, this becomes an important factor. So this again, MRI is the modality which can give us a fair idea about the exact number and morphology of lymph nodes at various stations. So this is an example of upper limb study where MRI lymphangiography has been performed. And here you can see a lot of dermal backflow has been documented. So after the injection of the contrast, when we take the 0-minute sequence, we know that ideally there should be no dermal backflow. But when we keep on following up these patients, we see that there will be attenuated lymphatic channels as compared to the normal side. And also we are going to document a lot of this kind of dermal backflow. So here I'll just use my pointer. So this is the attenuated kind of channel which we are able to document, and this kind of backflow. Again, an example where we can see that there is an abnormal lymphatic channel draining the contrast which has been administered. We can also tell the referring surgeon about the venous channels which are passing nearby or close by if they are planning to perform any microsurgical vascular interventions. So this kind of details can be provided with MR lymphangiography. So it is a comparison between scintigraphy study and lymphangiography study, where you can see on scintigraphy, which Dr. Ranade sir will be taking in details. The structural detail is less as compared to these kind of images which we acquire with MRI. MRI, as we all understand, as when we compare with CT scan, there are no radiation. So it's completely minimally invasive and completely harmless kind of modality which a person can be offered with. And similar to what lymphoscintigraphic patterns we understand between differentiating primary and secondary lymphedema, similar thing can be extrapolated to the MR study. So when it is primary with hypoplasia, aplasia, the lymphatic collectors are poorly defined or not seen. Nodal visualization may be faint or delayed. And the tracer dispersion, which is the dermal backflow, it is very early and prominent. But in cases of secondary lymphedema, the collectors which are going to be intact, they will be discretely seen. The nodal visualization is delayed, faint, or absent, so that will be non-specific. But the dermal backflow will be delayed, variable, and usually prominent later as compared to cases of primary lymphedema. So another example from the scintigraphy study, and why do we take so many phases? Because it is important to document presence of the early dermal backflow, the late dermal backflow, also to document whether there is any discrepancy or any abnormality with the deep lymphatics, which can be shown in the early phases, and any abnormality with the superficial lymphatics, which can be seen in the later phases. So details which are obtained via these kinds of study, which is MRI lymphangiography, would be presence, that is the confirmation of presence of lymphedema. Then also about the extent and severity of the condition, number, diameter, course, and depth of these kinds of abnormal channels from the skin, which will be important for surgical intervention point of view. Exact distance between the affected lymphatic vessel and the vein, we've chosen for the lymphovenous anastomosis. Also giving an idea about the lymphatic drainage pattern, which can be divided into three types. Type 1, where there is poor lymphatic drainage or diffuse interstitial enhancement, that is the dermal backflow. Type 2, where there is partially diffuse enhancement or interstitial and vascular enhancement. If some lymphatic channels are depicted in that area, that is honeycombing pattern. And type 3, where if the lymphatic enhancement is without any dermal backflow. Also, we will comment upon the delay of drainage, which gives an idea to the surgeon about the degree of attenuation of the lymphatic drainage, and we can provide a semi-quantitative scoring for these patients. Typically, the terminology which we are going to use in our reports will be dermal backflow, which I tried explaining. Absent or delayed radio tracer transport is what is used for nuclear scans. Here we are using the term for our gadolinium contrast in MRI. Crossover filling with retrograde backflow, absent or delayed lymph node visualization. So what are the advantages of MR lymphangiography above other techniques? That is, it is more accurate with functional and anatomical information. We won't be using CT much because it has radiation, and these many repetitions are not recommended with a CT scan. Even the details of soft tissue, that is muscles, bones, will be better with MR. Better spatial and temporal resolution. It will depict the drainage pattern, lymph node position, lymphatics and venous structures, as well as the severity of lymphedema. Minimally invasive, lack of ionizing radiation, and good tolerability of the subcutaneous injection by patient. So it's virtually pain-free for the patient. But what are the limitations? It is really a long duration of the study. So you have to explain it to the patient, all the steps which will be taking place, because usually MRI patients are there for 15-20 minutes, but this is almost like a complete 24 hours procedure if we are calling it for a repeat follow-up. Otherwise, almost 2 to 3 hours of a procedure. Occasional difficulty in distinguishing the affected lymphatic vessel when it is confusing us with the venous contamination, because gadolinium chelates being water soluble and diffusible, the venous drainage of the contrast agent is also partially present. So that is something which we should be aware of. That is a technical limitation of MR based contrast. Not getting into the details of these, but yes, a lot of studies are coming up. Even we have performed, like initially, maybe say 2 years back, we were not performing MR lymphangiography studies, but with the support of our team and especially Dr. Manasvi, here we are performing a lot of lymphangiography studies now, even for pediatric age group patient. And there are promising evidences that with this, the information which we can provide to the surgeon is really helpful for patient management. So with this, I would like to conclude my topic today. So lymphedema is relatively common but underdiagnosed entity. With upcoming advances in microsurgical intervention, prognosis has definitely improved. MRI lymphangiography is a potential but underutilized technique of imaging in lymphedema, and it has several advantages which we already discussed. It gives excellent anatomical detail as well as adequate functional details. So with this, I would like to end this talk, but if there are any questions or query, I would be happy to answer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. It was very nice and informative talk. Presently, there is no questions in chat box. And I think we will take question answer later.
Sure.
So thank you very much. So
Thank you, Vitisha.
Thank you, sir.
our next speaker is Dr. Rohit Ranade. He is consultant and head of the department of nuclear medicine at Nanavati Hospital, and he is going to talk on role of nuclear medicine in lymphedema. Dr. Rohit Ranade, sir.
Yeah, ma'am, I am audible to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are audible.
Yes.
Can you see the screen, sir?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Rohit. I am the consultant head for the Department of Nuclear Medicine at Nanavati Hospital. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for inviting me for this talk today. So moving on to lymphoscintigraphy in lymphedema for extremities. So basically it's a lymphostatic disease, which is characterized by progressive accumulation of protein-rich fluid in the interstitial space. It is generally secondary to anatomic or functional obstruction. So I won't go through the causes of lymphedema, which have already been covered by Dr. Wag. So coming on to the diagnosis of lymphedema. So majority of the patients get diagnosed by just clinical examination and history. So investigations are ancillary in the management of lymphedema, which include biochemical tests to look for secondary lymphedema, radiological X-rays, ultrasound Doppler, CT, MR, direct and indirect lymphography, and lastly, lymphoscintigraphy. So what is lymphoscintigraphy? It is basically radiocolloids and radio-labeled macromolecules of suitable size, which are introduced in appropriate planes and are transported by lymphatics and are localized in lymph nodes. So in lymphoscintigraphy, we image the functional components of lymphatic system under normal and abnormal conditions. So it is widely considered to be one of the main investigations to establish the diagnosis of lymphedema and to visualize the peripheral lymphatics. So the properties of radiocolloids are they are exclusively transported by lymphatic system when introduced in proper plane. No prior preparation of lymph vessels are required. There is accumulation of tracer in the involved lymph nodes. There is a standardized protocol with reproducibility, sterile, homogeneous, physiological and chemically inert colloid of appropriate size is present. Optimal mobilization in 3 hours with minimal tissue retention is seen with patients who undergo lymphoscintigraphy. Physiological pH and ionic strength of the radiocolloids, and no biological toxicity or antigenicity is observed with radiocolloids. So these are the various radiocolloids which are used in lymphoscintigraphy. So filtered sulfur colloid and human serum albumin or nanocolloid as it's called are used very commonly for lymphoscintigraphy. Previously, the most suitable agent was antimony sulfide, which is now not available in India. So the protocol for lymphoscintigraphy is, so you inject about 0.5 to 1 millicurie of the radiocolloid into the web spaces of the upper limb and or the lower limb or both of them together, and we can take these images together. So the injection techniques include intradermal, subcutaneous, and subfacial. So basically 3 images are acquired One is an immediate image, which is within the first 20 minutes. The second is a post-exercise massage image, which is generally at 1 hour, and a delayed image at maybe 3 or 4 hours. So the various lymphoscintigraphic patterns are, so we look at basically various flow patterns. So the first criteria which we look at is multiple channels. So generally we get for a normal lymph, we get a pattern where we see a normal single channel draining from the intradermal space. But in cases of lymphatic dysfunction or obstruction, we may see multiple lymphatic channels arising from the injection site. So second are dilated channels. So we always compare the involved lymph with the contralateral normal lymph in cases of unilateral lymphedema, where we can see a normal lymph channel. If you look at the opposite side, there is a dilated lymphatic channel. Third is tortuous channels. So here you can see, because of dysfunction, there is no obstruction, but there is lymphatic dysfunction, which is generally due to involvement of superficial lymphatics. We see multiple tortuous channels arising from the injection site. This is observed on both sides. This is present not only below knee, but above knee as well. In the left lower limb, you can see it well below the lower limb. So this is the immediate images, and these are the post-exercise images. The fourth point which we see is delay to flow. So this delay to flow is generally seen in immediate images, which is within 20 minutes of injection. So we will generally be able to see the ilioinguinal nodes. So on the right lower limb, we are seeing the ilioinguinal nodes, whereas in the left lower limb, we are not able to see the ilioinguinal. So this is one of the criteria for evaluation of lymphatic dysfunction or obstruction. Diffuse or tapering vessels, visualization of lymph nodes at various stages, or non-visualization of lymph nodes. So here you can make out the right lower limb in post-massage images as well as delayed images do not show any ascent of tracer from this injection site, with non-visualization of nodes on the right side. Whereas on the left side, there is visualization of nodes, but there is a presence of dermal backflow. So there is lymphatic obstruction on the right side, but there is just lymphatic dysfunction on the left side. So flow through deeper system of popliteal nodes. So generally we see that there are cases of lymphedema where there is no obstruction because the lymphatic drainage is diverted from the superficial lymphatics to the deep lymphatics, and we see it by demonstrating popliteal nodes. So this indicates that there is no lymphatic obstruction as such, but there is just lymphatic dysfunction where the superficial lymphatics are involved, but there is patency to lymphatic flow from the deep lymphatics. The lymphedema is there because it takes time for the lymph to be pumped, because generally in dependent positions, it may not go directly into the deep lymphatics. Superficial lymphatics are the ones which are the major carriers. So dermal backflow. So this is what is dermal backflow, where because of the absence of carriage of lymph from the lymphatic channels, the radiocolloid is pushed back towards the cutaneous surface. So this is the left lower limb, and this is for a case of upper limb scintigraphy in the right upper limb. Something called as lymph lakes, where we see accumulation of lymph along the facial planes. So a pathology leading to altered lymphatic flow and lymphedema. The causes are incompetent walls, partial or total occlusion of lymphatic vessels. This may lead to tortuous dilated collateral vessels, functionally decreased or functionally absent vessels, decreased or absent flow, crossover or retrograde flow, lymph stasis, or dermal backflow. So the usefulness of lymphoscintigraphy is basically to confirm the diagnosis of clinical and subclinical lymphedema. We can characterize the severity, we can grade the lymphedema for further management, for follow-up, and for risk assessment. Other uses of lymphoscintigraphy include evaluation of chyluria, suspected chyluria and chylothorax, differentiation from venous edema from lymphedema, determination of sentinel lymph nodes, which is very useful in cases of breast carcinomas, melanomas, cervix carcinomas, and various other tumors, monitoring after reconstructive surgery, and patients who are candidates for evaluation of patients for candidate for lymphatic microsurgery. So the grading includes, so this is the normal scan for the upper limbs where you see injection, visualization of the axillary nodes on the right and the left side. This is for the upper limbs. This is the immediate image, delayed image where we see together, and this is the post massage image. There's no dermal backflow, no multiple channels, nothing. So there's no demonstration of deltoid nodes as well. Similarly for the lower limbs, prompt ascent followed by early visualization, no dermal backflow, multiple channels, which continues up to the ilioinguinal as well as the retroperitoneal. So the grade 1 includes multiple or dilated lymphatic channels with delayed visualization in the immediate images. So this is delayed multiple channels as well on the left side. So for the lower limbs, you can see the left-sided lower limb is draining quickly, whereas the right side is taking time. So it is not obstruction, so it is kind of a dysfunction. It is graded as grade 1. So grade 2 includes when the lymphatics are diverted to the deeper lymphatics. That is evidenced by visualization of popliteal nodes. So here you can see in the left upper limb, you can see the deltoid nodes. This is the left lower limb edema. You can see bilateral popliteal nodes indicating lymphatic dysfunction. You can see various tortuous channels as well in this. So grade 3 is basically dermal backflow and late visualization of nodes. So here you can see dermal backflow, which is evident throughout. So there is visualization in the immediate, post-exercise, as well as delayed images. So left, massive left lower swelling, lot of dermal backflow, tortuous channels, but patency of the inguinal lymph nodes. So there's no obstruction, but there's definite dysfunction. So grade 4 is basically grade 1, 2, and 3 with non-visualization of lymph nodes. So this is grade 4, where you can see on the right side, you can see the axillary nodes very clearly, but there's no visualization on the left side with a lot of dermal backflow. So this is definite obstruction. So limb. On the left limb, there's dysfunction, but on the right side, there's no ascent, non-visualization. So this is clear-cut obstruction. It can be also used in cases of scrotal lymphedema. Evaluation of scrotal swellings when scrotal lymphedema is in question. So this is how we do it. We use the routine protocols. If there is some collection of lymphatic related edematous tissue in the scrotum, we'll be able to see it in delayed images. This is evaluation for a chyle leak in the on the left side, where there was massive pleural effusion. There was a leak at the level of the thoracic duct. So in addition, just to planar images, we can do a SPECT CT, where we can, with a higher end CT along with the SPECT system, we can find out the location of the leak. So this is a post-operative case on the left side, where we see there is dermal backflow here, and there is no drainage. There's dysfunction on the right side as well because of the deltoid nodes. Post-operative status on the right lower limb, there is a delay of visualization, dermal backflow, multiple channels, tortuosity, but we can see nodes still on the right side. So again, it is dysfunction rather than obstruction. So this is post-operative. Some of the congenital cases where congenital lymphedema was there, but generally these appear to be, this case at least appears to be more of a dysfunction rather than obstruction. Here there is an obstruction on the right side, which is apparent in the immediate and the post-exercise image, but some amount of drainage we still see. So it is kind of a partial obstruction with visualization of the popliteal. Clipper trend. There is a normal drainage on the right side, but the left limb is involved. There is a lot of dermal backflow right up to the thigh region. Post-filial, where there is a complete obstruction on the right side, but on the left side there is some amount of drainage, but partial obstruction. So in conclusion, it is a very useful tool in diagnosis. It can help in effective therapy planning. It can be used for confirmation of interlogy by its characteristic patterns. In filial lymphedema, it can be used as a screening procedure. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So there are questions. When do you advise MRI or scintigraphy? Do you advise MRI or scintigraphy?
So basically so you can do any of them, frankly speaking. So cost is one of the major issues. So a lymphoscintigraphy would cost you maybe 5,000 or 5,500 rupees, but an MRI would definitely be more expensive. Second thing is you require gadolinium for MRI. So a renal compromised patient, you cannot use MRI. But in lymphoscintigraphy, you can do it in renal compromise as well. Looking at the performance parameters for evaluation of lower limb at least, both appear almost equivalent. Maybe lymphoscintigraphy is more of an established technique rather than MRI. One advantage of lymphoscintigraphy, you can evaluate upper and lower limbs together, which you cannot do it with MRI. So the time of imaging will increase greatly with MRI. Time of imaging with lymphoscintigraphy is shorter, maybe up to 3 to 4 hours, but with MRI, it is a bit longer.
So can I ask you one question? Actually, that question was posted by me only in the chat.
Yes,
to carry it forward, see, we all know that lymphedema is more or less a clinical diagnosis,
Yes, sir.
whether in the acute form or the chronic form, the diagnosis is practically established. So
Yes,
whether this kind of costly investigations are actually required to diagnose, maybe pre-operatively, if you're planning for some kind of surgery, you want to know the level of the block or the kind of block, probably maybe a different issue altogether. But just to know whether it is a lymphedema or any other edema, is it necessary to do all this investigation?
So probably when you are looking at whether it is obstruction or dysfunction, that is when you need to evaluate it, because the treatment may vary. If it is an obstruction, you may need to go for a reconstruction. But if it is a dysfunction, it is just due to probably the incompetency of the valves rather than anything else. So this will generally help you in evaluating the level of the involved region, whether it is below knee, at the ankle, or just at the level of thigh. It can be made out clinically as well. But with obstruction as well as dysfunction, you get a very similar picture as long as clinical evaluation is concerned. So it is just swelling. Looking at it, the skin signs may or may not be present depending on the duration of the disease. So I think to find out the level of the obstruction, this may be important, as well as to look at whether it is frankly obstruction or just kind of a dysfunction. So it may give you a guide regarding if you want to operate it.
Kuldeep, you may unmute Dr. Vinay Mahindale. He is there in the attendees list. He wants to make a comment. Kuldeep?
I'll do that, sir. Yes,
In the
sir, I'm
mean-
doing that.
Yes, sir.
Dr.
we can-
Vinay.
Dr. Vinay Mahindale.
Vinay sir is saying it's important to do.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
for
yes,
criteria.
Absolutely. So there is no investigation where you can actually evaluate chyluria.
It is important to do it during chyluria because
Yes.
you can find out. Otherwise, I think it's very important about this.
Yes. So generally, we have done it in few cases where there was abdominal tuberculosis, where we have documented it. So with that abdominal TB, there was involvement of the renal system, where there was a leak from the lymphatics into the ureter, and we could document chyluria in this case, where we were able to document the radio tracer going into the bladder, which actually confirmed the diagnosis.
Because
and which-
because in chyluria is one place where you can treat it by doing
Yes.
hilar clearance.
Yes. Similar with chylothorax as well. You can actually, it's PET CT, and there are new techniques. So PET MRI is there, where you have a gallium-68 labeled colloid, where you can get a very beautiful PET MR image, where you can pinpoint the site of leak. This is a very expensive investigation, not available in India, but there are techniques where we can do chylothorax, chyluria, scrotal lymphedema. These are things where lymphoscintigraphy scores over MRI very clearly. And in fact, I feel in lymphatic dysfunction as well, it is more useful than MRI.
Chairperson may introduce the last speaker,
Yes.
and he wanted to speak also, so he can speak at the same time when he's about to make his own talk.
Thank you, Dr. Rohit Ranade sir. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Anshuman Manasvi. He is a consultant plastic surgeon, and he's going to talk on management of lymphedema. Dr. Anshuman Manasvi sir.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Niranjan. Thank you, Rajesh, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak on lymphedema management. I'll just start with. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Very much. You can put it on full screen now.
Yeah. So today I'll be talking about the comprehensive treatment, or rather management, of lymphedema. And I'm a consultant at Nanavati Hospital and Bombay Hospital. And I have my center at Vile Parle West. So first, to talk about the question which was there, whether it is necessary to do these investigations or not, I've got a little different perspective. And that perspective is that lymphedema many a times is a diagnosis of exclusion, especially if it is bilateral, and which is quite frequently in our setting of filariasis. And secondly, from medico-legal point of view, if we are able to document that, yes, this is lymphedema, the lymphoscintigraphy being the gold standard, I think it is worth doing two studies. One is a color Doppler and one is a lymphoscintigraphy before labeling any patient with only having lymphedema. So that is my take on that. And so coming to the management part, so first I will talk about the diagnosis part, which has not been probably covered, is that whenever we suspect a lymphedema, first we have to rule out other systemic causes of a lymphedema, especially if it is bilateral. If it is unilateral, a venous pathology must be ruled out. And for that, ultrasound and a color Doppler is important. And then lymphoscintigraphy is there. MR lymphangiography or MR lymphangiography is probably reserved for cases where we need to know whether there is a congenital problem, because congenital lymphedema with absence or minimal lymph nodes would be much more delineated on an MRI rather than lymphoscintigraphy. And because obstruction will give rise to non-visualization of those lymph nodes in lymphoscintigraphy, but MRI will clearly pick the lymph nodes. If MRI is not available, I would rather do an ultrasonography of both the sides and compare of both the limbs and check if the lymph nodes are adequate on both the sides. Normally around 10 to 12 lymph nodes are usually there on each side, which are good enough to be visualized. And in aplasia or hypoplasia, obviously it is less. So whenever we decide about the treatment of lymphedema, most important thing is the team and the infrastructure that is required. The team is a lymphedema surgeon, but most important is the associated physiotherapist or lymphedema therapists who form the backbone of the treatment. And these are the ones who will treat you non-surgically by the treatments like pressure garments and manual lymphatic drainage, about which I'll be talking about. And then if you want to venture into the surgery part, one should have, with the latest surgeries which are there, one should have a OT setup with ICU facilities and a microscope with micro instruments. So the non-surgical treatment consists of 4 or 5 things. One is manual lymphatic drainage, which is essentially a type of specialized massage for lymphedema, compression dressings, infection prevention, and physiotherapy. And in surgical, we have lymphaticovenous shunts, vascularized lymph node transfer, vascularized lymphatic transfers, excisional procedures, and reconstructions. Let us not forget that the surgeries for infection control is equally important. A history is very important, especially when we are thinking of filariasis and endemic. Somebody is coming from an endemic zone. Travel history equally important, and we have to rule out cardiac, renal, or venous or acute vascular event for edema which can happen in the limbs. History of any other neighbor suffering from lymphedema also gives an indication that it may be of filarial origin. And on the local examination, we have discussed about the type of edema, but we must specifically look for any active infection or redness, which are signs of lymphangitis, any fungal infection, ulcerations, lymph nodes, and peripheral pulses. Measurement forms a very important aspect of the whole management, and fixed level management measurements are required. Bony points are identified, and that should be recorded in a chart. This is a chart which we follow, and based on the upper limb or lower limb, multiple points are identified and they are marked, and the distance from bony prominence, as is the standard case, is done. Documentation by photographs is important, and volumetric analysis by either volume displacement technique of plethysmography or MRI, or whenever it is done, or a CT scan can be there. But most commonly in the clinical setting, since it is not going to make a lot of difference unless and until we are going to really measure specific millimeter or centimeter wise, I tend to go with a simple measurement only. So what is manual lymphatic drainage? A very important aspect of the whole management. Manual lymphatic drainage is a special type of massage. It's also called decongestive therapy. And it is a special type of massage which opens the dormant collateral lymphatics and pushes the fluid through these lymphatics when there is a blockage of the main lymphatics. It has to be done all throughout the life in case of lymphedema, even after surgery. But after surgery, it is much more effective, and in many cases, it can be omitted as well. Essentially, it is a low pressure massage involving 4 steps, which I'll be showing in a small video. It decreases the lymphedema, it makes the tissue soft and pliable, and it gives an opportunity for an inspection for any injury or infection. This is a small video.
There is no audio, please.
There is no audio.
Dr.
Can't hear.
Anshu.
Okay, okay. Can't hear the audio. 1 second. I will give the commentary.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So in the manual lymphatic drainage, what we are essentially doing is that we are opening up the collaterals. Now, when the collaterals are to be opened up, first the normal lymphatics proximal to the affected limb, they have to be opened up. So now the staff nurse is actually opening up the proximal unaffected lymphatics and then going downwards from proximal to distal. This she has done from the back. Similarly, it has to be done from the front as well, wherein the massage actually opens up, gradually mobilizes the lymphatics. The pressure need not be high. It should be very soft massage between 40 to 60 millimeters of mercury. But it is what essentially when we are doing it is soft. So that is good enough. The idea is we should not be damaging the lymphatics. Now it takes around 15 to 20 minutes for this first step going downwards till the fingers. Now the second step will start, which will again be from the proximal portion to the distal portion. Now since the proximal lymphatics have been opened up, now this is pushing the lymphatics from distal to proximal, again going from top to the distal end. This again takes around 15 to 20 minutes, and it has to be done a little more slowly than what is being depicted over here. The 2 steps are from proximal to distal up to the fingers. Now, third stage is from the distal to proximal. We can use either powder or oil. I use powder because it is much more easy for us to manage, and the oil can make it messy. So this is the third step, again going up from distal to proximal. Fourth step is again the same step of like the third step, again repeated. So essentially there are 4 steps. So that is how the manual lymphatic drainage is done. The next important thing is stockings or 4-layer bandaging. Multi-layered bandaging using stockinets, foam and short stretch bandage is done. Stockinets are to prevent any, they are of soft linen, so they prevent any abrasions. Foam is again very protective. And then short stretch bandage, not the crepe bandages which we use. Short stretch bandages give more pressure. So essentially we have a layer of bandages, but the most outer one is giving us the maximum pressure so that the lymphatics are not damaged again. At all time, we are to be very, very careful that we are not damaging the lymphatics, because if they are damaged, then ultimately, if we want to do any surgery or if we want long-term result, that will suffer. 4-layer bandaging is little cumbersome, but it is most effective and it should be used at home. Stockings can be used for going out, and stockings are actually good if the limb is evenly more swollen. But if there are irregularities, as it happens in the filarial limbs, then the stockings will lose its effectivity, because intermittently there will be areas which will be devoid of any pressure. So that is where the 4-layer bandaging, which is more customized, will come into play. And in very regular swelling, the stockings will not work, or rather they can increase the edema, because at one point there will be more pressure and at the other place there will be less pressure. So non-surgical management means medical management, which is dicarbamazine, ivermectin, doxycycline for filariasis, prevention and treatment of lymphangitis or cellulitis with proper foot care, antibiotics or debridement as the case may be, manual lymphatic drainage, limb elevation during the day and night. Even if somebody is working in the office, we have to tell that person, okay, at least for half an hour, 45 minutes, every 2 hours, just put your leg on a stool and make it horizontal or little elevated, and the compression dressings. Now, it is very important again to emphasize that venous pathology must be ruled out before any treatment is instituted, because many a time it coexists, especially the valvular incompetence, which can make the treatment part, even the surgery, more difficult to be offered. A chemotherapy of filariasis, DEC 6 milligram per kg for 12 to 21 days, ivermectin 12 microgram, 200 microgram per kg, single dose, and albendazole for 2 weeks, twice daily. There's a treatment of Wolbachia. This is a obligatory intracellular parasite bacteria which is found inside the filarial worms. So all these, the previous treatments, DEC, ivermectin, albendazole, do not actually kill the adult worms. This treatment by doxycycline, which actually kills the Wolbachia bacteria, is detrimental for the adult worms. So that is what is the importance of doxycycline or rifampicin, but the duration is around 6 to 8 weeks, and it will kill the adult worms. Use of steroids as and when may be necessary, because of inflammatory markers may just rise in the blood and give rise to asthma and things like that. And that low-fat diet with supplements of essential fatty acids and protein will decrease the lymphedema. Role of lymphatic massage machine. Most of us who are into these surgeries agree that manual lymphatic drainage is better because the pressure can be modulated by the touch. Now, what pressure is transmitted by the machine, lymphatic massage machine or LymphaPress, they are giving fixed pressures. Now, the pressure which is actually transmitted to the lymphatics depends on the size of the limb, which can at that particular time, for example, distal or proximal. So the diameter of the limb at that particular time will decide how much the pressure is transmitted. And the second thing is, what is the type of skin, how thick is the skin, how much is the fibrosis, that will determine actually how much is the pressure which is getting transmitted. So with fixed pressure devices, which actually are offered by these machines, actual pressure which is transmitted is not very, very accurate. Contrast that with manual lymphatic drainage, because our touch is a very, very good machine in itself. You can modulate the pressure based on the thickness of the skin, the diameter of the limb at that particular time, and modulate how much pressure you want to give. And over a period of time with training, it is very, very accurate. So paradoxically, the machines can also increase the edema, because the 3 steps of manual lymphatic drainage, which I showed, are not replicated in the machines, because machines only push from distal to proximal. But proximal opening of the channels are not done. So machine is, in my opinion and opinion of many other people, is not the best thing. And unless and until we have some really new machines which actually read the pressure gradient and modulate the pressure, I don't think machines which are commonly sold should be used. Rather, it would be better if the staff is trained to give this massage, and it will be much better for the patient. Now, coming to the indications for surgery, ideally the best case for a surgery is a limb which is soft and supple, where lymphedema is just started to come, and where there is no excess fat or fibrosis. Please remember that lymphedema, once it is started, unless and until it is controlled very well, it is going to increase. And that increase will happen because of either trauma or heavy weight lifting or infection. So we cannot probably avoid that progression in a very good way. Unless then until the patient is really obsessed with that, some patients are, and they really protect their limb very well. So if there is a patient who is unable to take care of his limb very well, maybe surgery can be offered early, and that may be curative before the fibrosis has occurred. Extremely fibrotic limb and elephantiasis are not the best candidates for lymphedema treatment. Infection mandates and early infection control, including surgery like debridement or antibiotics, and preventive lymphedema surgeries during mastectomy with lymphovenous anastomosis has recently been started and is quite effective for many patients. This is a small video for the lymphaticovenous shunt. So the lymphatics are dilated. They are identified by injecting methylene blue or isosulfan blue. Isosulfan blue is superior than methylene blue. And once they are identified, the smallest venules are chosen. Now we must remember that it should not be a large vein, because the pressure in the large vein will prevent the lymphatic flow from the lymphatics to the vein. So the flow in So you can see here that the vein is very, very clear now, and the lymph is actually flowing. So the vein should not be very big. It should have minimal pressure so that the pressure gradient is easily overcome. And there should be a valve which should be there in that small venule. So these make the choice of venule a little tricky matter, but mostly we are able to find such a venule which is small and has a valve as well. Because once the fluid passes through that valve, it doesn't come back. So that acts and increases a suction kind of a mechanism for the lymphatics to flow. Please remember that, as I said before, the pressure gradient has to be maintained by pressure garments and massage. Because in filariasis, for example, the valves are destroyed. So till the time there is a high pressure, the fluid will keep on going from the lymphatics to the vein. But when things start becoming normal, again, the lymphatics will not flow. So it is the pressure which actually will keep on pushing the lymphatics from the lymphatics to the vein. So that is why manual lymphatic drainage and pressure are the most important things even after surgery, although they have the capability to decrease the infection and fibrosis in the long run. There is another procedure which I want to mention is vascularized lymph node transfer. Now here the group of lymph nodes with based on vascular pedicle artery and veins are taken from various areas. They can be taken here. It is depicted from supraclavicular area, but otherwise it can be taken from lateral part of the groin, from submental area, and they are taken and they are anastomosed in the affected limb using microvascular free flap technique. Now these group of lymphatics, they act as a chemotactic agent and release various growth factors, mostly platelet-derived growth factors and vascular growth factors, and stimulate lymphaticogenesis. And that is how that the lymphatics keep on developing. That is one theory. The other theory is that it acts as a suction for the lymphatics by itself. But the exact mechanism is not known how it works, but it definitely works. That is for sure. There are enough literature in the journals to show that it definitely works. So here we have taken the supraclavicular lymph node and we have anastomosed over here in this fashion in the upper limb. This is the case of CA breast in which we have done this surgery to cure the lymphedema. So now coming to specific, how do we treat each pathology? Now for filariasis, we know that the dilated ducts are there. So manual lymphatic drainage and pressure bandaging, very important. Medical treatment, very important. And prevention of infection and good hygiene is there. Lymphatico-venous shunt is the procedure of choice. We may do 2 or 3. Mostly we are able to do a couple of them and we get quite a good result with it. But if the patient is not responding, additional ones also can be done at a later date. Excisional surgeries and debridement form a very important part. And excisional surgeries may include the drastic Charles procedure type of modified Charles procedure type of procedure where whole skin is excised and skin grafting is done. But many a times it may be for small problems where there's a necrotic wound and we have to graft it and all that. Additional vascularized lymph node transfer will help in development of some healthy lymphatic channels. That is what is presumed, still debated, but lymphatico-venous shunt forms the most important part of the management. Long-term MLD and bandaging is very required, as I said, to maintain the pressure gradient for the lymphatics to flow. For congenital lymphedema, manual lymphatic drainage is not very effective because overall the lymphatics are very less. Pressure bandaging may help, again, not very, very helpful. So essentially the treatment comes down to a surgery, and surgery, vascularized lymph node transfer, is the most effective surgery in this abnormal, in this condition. And lymphatico-venous shunt, if at all it is there, if possible, we should be doing. And in one patient, we could not find actually the good lymphatics to do that. Lymphatico-venous shunt we tried, but vascularized. So that was one patient where we did that isolated lymphatico-venous shunt in the proximal portion. In the inguinal region, we could not find. So we did in the distal portion. I will show you the slides. But such cases are that best treated by vascularized lymph node transfer. So that was one case where we were not doing this vascularized lymph node transfer. So she did not do very well. But after one vascularized lymph node transfer, another vascularized lymph node transfer can also be done. That is our recent trends show of our treatment. Long-term maintenance with pressure stockings will be important. Manual lymphatic drainage will become important after the surgery. Post-cancer lymphedema, again, lymphatico-venous shunt is the procedure of choice because there's a lymphatics which have been severed during the axillary dissection or groin dissection. So it can be identified with methylene blue or isosulfan blue, and the anastomosis can be done. Additional vascularized lymph node transfer may or may not be done, but lymphatic venous shunt is the most important procedure for this. Preventive lymphatic venous shunt, as I said, is becoming very, very popular now in lymphedema during the modified radical mastectomy or a groin dissection. So these are some of the results. Now, these are filarial patients in which lymphatico-venous shunts have been done, and the result can be really drastic. You can see the result almost melting in next 2-3 days. So in a week's time, you would see that the pressure has, the diameter has come down significantly. This is on the left side. This patient has a congenital lymphedema associated with filariasis, very, very rare combination. And we were very reluctant initially to touch this patient because of extreme fibrotic limb. This is the extreme fibrotic limb, and but his leg was weighing more than 60 kilos. He was just unable to walk. So when we decided to offer him the treatment, and the treatment was vascularized lymph node transfer and lymphatico-venous shunt, and within 2 weeks' time, his pre-op diameter at this level from 117 centimeters came down to 79 centimeters. He's still continuing to improve. Now he is able to drive his scooty, and he will require some more surgeries later on, excisional surgery over here, maybe over here, and some surgeries have been planned. We will see how his quality of life is and decide on each and every surgery which is going to be there. This is one patient which I talked about, which we actually failed doing a lymphatico-venous shunt in the proximal portion. We could not find, and we thought that we have to give up or something like that, because at that time we were not doing vascularized lymph node transfer. But I went down, and over here I could find some lymphatics which we anastomosed, and so this is the result after 6 or 7 days. Now still the dyes are still over here, so we can make out that the changes are very, very significant, very, very drastic. Now long-term results will also depend on how the patient follows up with the massage and bandaging. So these are some of the limitations which we find in our country. Now this is of these two cases I am showing is of carcinoma of breast after mastectomy. The lymphedema has been reduced by vascularized lymph node transfer in both the cases. no lymphaticovenous shunt has been done over here because they come very, very late. It is difficult. We tried to find, but we could not find any lymphatics over there. So maybe the path of the lymphatics is a little different. So if in these cases, if the swelling does not improve after a certain time, then in that case, we can think of a lymphaticovenous shunt after doing proper MRI and other studies. So here we can clearly see the difference in the volume. These are the other procedures which sometimes put a lot of dilemma in our mind, come very regularly to all of us, including all types of doctors, surgeons, plastic surgeons, anyone. And here, simplest procedure is offered, skin grafting, but the long-term results again may not be very good. There may be graft losses over a period of time. And overall quality, we have to check how the patient is there and gradually go on to surgeries. Now, the next part of the surgery will be trying to debulk this. In some extreme cases where all these are not possible and patient is really bad, amputation can also be one procedure which can be thought of. This is to show the Swiss roll operation which we have been reading about, not done nowadays. In just for completion's sake, I will say that this is the thickened subcutaneous tissue. So a part of subcutaneous tissue is excised, the epidermis is removed, and this is buried in, and then the stitching is done, more shown over here. It somehow did not work quite a bit. So now general tendency is to stitch this rather than bury it. So burying thing has not worked very well in the hands. So this procedure is no longer followed by many people. This is penile lymphedema excisional treatment, does very good, and the results and the sexual activity and performance equally good. There is no problem at all. This is a procedure of choice for penile lymphedema. The other excisional therapies may mean liposuction in select cases because fat increases the lymphatics and lymphatics stimulate the fat. So it is a vicious cycle. So in select cases, very carefully one can do a liposuction, but then one has to be very sure after studying the lymphatics where the lymphatics are and what level the liposuction needs to be done. Coming to the treatment of complications of lymphedema, infection, one has to give antibiotics and antifilarial treatment, cellulitis and debridement, SOS skin graft or flap cover as the case may be. Limb-threatening infection, amputation remains the procedure of choice in many cases, not always definitely. Lymphangiosarcoma, excisional surgery or amputation may be required. At all time, pulmonary inflammatory response must be kept in mind during the treatment, especially in filariasis or related parasite infections. Factors determining the outcome. Early identification of the problem is the most important determinant. We must try and educate the patient, ask them to take care of the limb, wear shoes, and start the conservative treatment as early as possible. We should try and prevent infection because infection will give rise to fibrosis and the circle again will keep on increasing. Prevention of infection and lymphangitis, regular self-inspection is very important, and early antibiotic treatment. Pressure garment, manual lymphatic drainage, and then the surgeries. Newer concepts, these are evolving field. Lot of things are not known, especially in vascularized lymph node transfer. Previously, we used to do omental transposition. Still, it has generated a new interest now, and combined with the recent microvascular techniques which are there, a lot of good things have started to happen again after these things which have happened in the last decade or so. If there is a late presentation like what I showed you in that boy, the choice is not very clear. Either there are proponents which say first the excisional procedure should be done, followed by a definitive procedure, or what we did was that first we decreased the swelling by the lymphatico-venous shunt and vascularized lymph node transfer, so that the excision becomes much more amenable and the blood loss and complications become less. The future is that it is very promising. New frontiers are coming, and over a period of time, a lot of new things will come. More and more awareness needs to be built, especially for the conservative treatment, which can decrease the progression to the fibrotic stage, and training of lymphedema therapists and paramedics. We are planning to start a course very soon. So this is my present team with physiotherapists, nurse therapists, and we'll be soon starting a course. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was very nice talk. There are, some questions are there.
Yes, please.
Dr. Vinay Mehendale, sir, is asking, how successful is the shunt for treatment of lymphedema after mastectomy?
Sir, immediate success rate is very high, almost around 90 to 95%. Overall, it depends on how the patient is actually following it up with the regular massages and other manual lymphatic drainage. Long-term results, around 50 to 60% of the patients will benefit in the long run. Around 20 to 30% will not do very well. But still, almost around 50 to 60% of the patients, we should be able to help them quite well in the long run.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, which preoperative imaging is used by you, Dr. Manasvi, sir? Which preoperative imaging you do, sir?
Preoperative, I generally do, as I said, ultrasonography. First thing is to differentiate whether it is filarial or congenital. That is the most important thing. The gold standard is lymphoscintigraphy. If there is a doubt, and because this congenital lymphedema sometimes present as TARDA or PRECOX, it is a diagnosis of exclusion. And there MRI is, as well as lymphoscintigraphy, both are required to actually label that. Otherwise, only lymphoscintigraphy and ultrasound color Doppler is important. Milroy's disease, not Milroy's disease, in fact, the congenital lymphedema, the late ones, many a time we have seen at least 10 patients. Out of that, I have seen almost 6 had associated venous problems. And that makes surgery very difficult, because ultimately we are doing lymphatico-venous shunt. And if we are doing it proximal, where there is a valvular incompetence, then the surgery will not be effective. So we have to take a decision to do it distally, where there is a dermal backflow. So these are the things which are required for decision making. But lymphoscintigraphy alone is good enough, apart from color Doppler, for filarial lymphedema. No special test after that is required. As I said, that I want to do a lymphoscintigraphy to document that yes, it is there, so that medico-legally there is no problem, and color Doppler to rule out any venous pathology.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Vinay Mehendale, sir, also wants to know any experience with femoral artery ligation, or it's obsolete?
No, femoral artery ligation we are not doing, not done. I have yet not seen any literature to this in the last 10 years or so.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Anjali Dowle, madam, wants to know what is the role of silicone tubes in subcutaneous planes as a treatment of lymphedema?
Not many people are using it. These are experimental treatments, have been used, but these treatments which I showed are giving very good results. So those treatments are not very effective, not used any treatment which could have been effective would have been present now. Not many people are using it. Yes, Momentum, as I said, has generated a fresh interest, and even vascularized free omental transfer has generated good interest. Yet to form an opinion whether that is better than vascularized lymph node from supraclavicular area or other areas.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Ankit Shah wants to know which how many lymphovascular anastomosis to be done in early lymphedema post lymph node dissection, axillary lymph node dissection.
Two is what is sort of standard if it is possible. Many a times it is not easy to find the lymphatics. So even if you are able to do one, it is sufficient, because if one is draining, now fluid is all over in the subcutaneous tissue, area. So finally it will be caught up by the lymphatics and it will get drained through that single lymphatico-venous shunt if it is done. So no need to do more. If you are able to do one, it is good enough. More than one is a bonus. More than two is very, very difficult. It is very taxing as well to do. It takes around 8-9 hours to do a couple of them. So that is how it is.
Yes, sir. So is there any role for a DEC in chronic cases?
I see DEC in chronic cases, it is very difficult to say if the patient is not harboring microfilaria at that moment of time. So as an empirical treatment, all patients who we see are given DEC, albendazole and ivermectin. But we have to also see that if the patient has received in the last 6 months, no need to repeat it. If the time interval is more than 6 months, we can repeat the course, because that will make sure that no microfilaria is there in the body at that point of time when we plan to do all this.
Yes, sir. So do you have any video of 4-layer dressing, applying how to apply 4-layer dressing or compression?
Yes, I have, but because of shortage of time, I could not show it. But I will definitely share that link with Rajesh, and he can just pass it on for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
It is not very difficult. It is there on the La Transformation YouTube channel, but because of shortage of time, I could not actually show that. But it is very, very simple. I will share the link with Rajesh or Dr. Niranjan or Dr. Rajesh.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Mannan, sir.
No, Anshuman.
Yes, sir.
This is an excellent talk. We have no words to talk about something. This is something where we have never ventured.
Thank you, sir.
You opened this new frontier for surgeons. There's something more than what we have been doing, bandaging and heat treatment, massage and all. But now, this procedure, I hope they help patients. I want to know how early we can do lymph node transfer after MRM.
As soon as, sir, after MRM, not all patients develop lymphedema. So once the lymphedema is started, it is going to progress in most of the cases. So I have two suggestions. One is, if your patient is educated, can take care, you can wait and see if the patient is developing any lymphangitis or not. And if the patient is managing the lymph very well, we can postpone it, because almost 50-60% of these patients will be controlled only on pressure garments. But a patient who is not taking good care, early intervention is important. And because once the fibrosis occurs, then at that time, the treatment may not be as effective as it was done in a pliable state.
Do we have to wait till chemotherapy or radiotherapy is over?
I think so. Regarding radio, because these cancers, any surgery which is done in between will sort of decrease the, increase the duration of the treatment, delay the chemotherapy or radiotherapy, because after vascularized transfer, again, at least a month time has to be given for the tissues to heal. So I would probably do it only after that.
Regarding this vascular lymph node transfer, do you have to do 3 anastomies, one with the artery, other with vein, third one with the lymphatics?
No.
Only artery and vein.
Only an artery and vein. The lymphatics generate by themselves. The exact mechanism is not known, but the lymphatics generate by themselves. Many a times, lymphatics do not generate, but still the volume decreases. So there is a suction kind of mechanism which keeps on happening.
I've seen a picture or video where the lymph node has been put in the foot area. Does it work?
Yeah, it is actually not lymph node has been put in the foot. It is the vascularized lymph node. Whole transfer has been put in the ankle region, and that is one of the management where that is a good side, because foot lymphatics also are there, and the lymphatics can drain from there. So that is a standard treatment.
Thank you, Anshuman.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent talk. Very informative.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, excellent talk, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ashwini madam. Ashwini madam has been my teacher, and I am sharing this webinar with her. It's a real pleasure. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Anshu.
And thank you very much to Rajesh and Niranjan for putting such a good symposium today. Very informative. Otherwise, we were just treating with common thing like pressure and bandage and massage and heat treatment. Previously, we used to do heat treatment and massage.
So one treatment is definitely not advisable is all these lymphatic machines, which are of the older generation, just simple pressure kind of things. Please stop using that unless you've got the latest ones, which are probably have pressure sensors. I have not yet seen them, but I heard they are there. But the old ones are not effective. It is only for a placebo kind of a benefit.
Even the stockings nowadays, we used a graded stocking. The one which is cheaper ones available, especially the visco ones, probably are not very suitable ones.
Correct. In stockings also, one more thing is there that as the swelling keeps on decreasing, you have to tighten the stockings, and that is best done at home by sewing, by hand stitching. It is very easy to teach them to pinch extra and then put some staplers and then stitch it later on. So I think these are the things, because once the stockings is loose, it will not be effective. The small things make a lot of difference.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for guiding us. Very informative and excellent talk, sir. Thank you all the speakers. Dr. Ashwini Wagh, Dr. Mitusha Verma, Dr. Rohit Ranade, and Dr. Anshuman Manasvi. Thank you all of you for guiding us.
Before concluding, I'll ask Dr. Niranjan Agarwal to say a few words, and then we'll conclude the session.
Yeah, so I think we had a very good interactive session. I can see that in the chat box, people have really appreciated the topic today, because these are certain topics which are not usually covered in most of the CMAs. So I'm thankful that people have liked it, and thanks to all the speakers to have put in their latest inputs, and the moderators to have really moderated it quite well and made it more interactive. There were senior surgeons like Dr. Mahendra, Dr. Begani, Dr. Anant Ram, etc., who had joined in today, including Dr. Khanna from Varanasi. So thank you, everyone, and see you again next Friday.
Yeah. Thank you, all the chairpersons and all the panelists, as well as the delegates. And we expect you for our next 10th lecture series next week, Friday. We are starting with lymph nodes as the topic where we'll be dealing with lymph nodes as well as salivary gland tumors evaluation. So I hope to see you all next week, Friday, same time. Okay, thank you, Juventus, for your continuous support to us. And then we conclude the session for today.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.